Footy Rants, round 18 review. We're back. How's your weekend? Hope it was good. Mine was stellar. Seeing Robbie Whittaker win in the UFC yesterday was fantastic. And yeah, I didn't really have too much to report on with the Cowboys not playing as far as the rugby league fan goes. But yeah, diving into the NRL table. So we've got the ladder here. Melbourne Storm out on front on 28 points. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that the loss to the Roosters in that tight one without their Origin stars could prove pivotal in the little space that they had created for themselves out in the lead. That's now shortened to just one victory alone. So yeah, it's going to make things very, very interesting. So still the Storm and the Sharks lead the way, as we've seen in season 2016. The Sharks on 26 points, the Roosters also on 26 points. Tied for fourth are Manly, Brisbane and North Queensland on 24 points. So Manly have the better for and against with 75, Broncos with 56 and the Cowboys with 43. In 7th and 8th place respectively, you've got the Dragons and Parramatta both on 22 points. And then you've got 2 wins in between. So there's a separation of 2 victories at the moment for the top 8. So Penrith sit outside that alongside the Warriors on 18 points. The Raiders, Rabbitohs and Bulldogs, as well as the Gold Coast, all on 16 points. The West Tigers on 12 and the last place Knights now 2 wins off the bottom of the ladder. So yeah, a really unfortunate last fortnight for the Newcastle Knights, who could have propelled themselves up the ladder and definitely created some space between themselves and the Tigers, but it's gone very much the other way. Which leads to some interesting struggles now for this top 4. The top 8 is getting closer now to being decided. We've got Penrith and the Warriors facing off against each other. So we see there both the 9th and 10th place on 18 points. So it'll be interesting to see which way that goes. It's being played over in New Zealand. So that's a vital victory for both of those clubs. Whoever loses that, probably making it really, really hard to sneak into that top 8. For me, everyone below that, I can't see the Rabbitohs, Bulldogs making a run home now. The Raiders and the Titans are an outside chance of getting something going, but those guys themselves are already 3 wins outside of the 8. So some things need to go drastically different for that to be turned around. So yeah, that's how the ladder stands as at round 18. So we'll get into the highlights from the weekend now. So the first game we had the local derby, the Rabbitohs up against the Roosters, and it was the Roosters who came out on top 14 points to 12. As we alluded to, missing so many Origin stars and coming off a big victory against Penrith last week, the South Sydney Rabbitohs. They really should have kicked on and beaten this under-strength Roosters outfit. Especially, I found having that reshuffle, keeping Latrell Mitchell on the wing on the opposite side to keep Manu in the centres there. I thought it was a pretty bold move. And then you also had Keary moving to the opposite side of the field. With Mitch Cornish ended up getting his opportunity. So they didn't end up running with that lineup that we spoke about in the preview last week. Connor Watson was relegated once again back to the bench for them. But the Roosters came out nice and strong, which I thought shocked the Rabbitohs. It's hard to say, you speak to a player off a game, oh no, we knew they were always going to be strong and that we couldn't doubt their abilities, but there's something psychological that you can't help. It's like, well, they're missing XYZ. I feel I'm stronger here. So therefore we've got reasons to win. And they were favourites coming into the game, but even amount of possession and completions, well, near enough to anyway, but the Rabbitohs definitely had their opportunities, coming up with 15 offloads in comparison to the Roosters 4. So, the experience and star power that they had over the top of the Roosters was definitely being shown. But yeah, the one word just sort of comes down to for the Rabbitohs was just execution. And it was that another play there. So we see Burgess spill the ball in the 54th minute. We see one later in the game. I believe it was the 72nd minute. Burgess spills another ball. Keeping in mind that they're still only down by 2 points in 8 minutes, you're going to get ample opportunities with the ball. At least 3 to 4 more cracks with the footy. And then after that, gives away a penalty after dropping a forearm into Latrell Mitchell's head. And Latrell Mitchell, being the young kid that he is, and wearing his heart on his sleeve, he loves that sort of shit. He's going to buy into that, and he'll very much feel as though that he got a win over someone who's won a premiership and played at a high international level, both at rugby league and rugby union. So yeah, shining lights for the Roosters. Mitch Cornish definitely grabbed his opportunity with both hands. I thought his kicking game out of trouble as far as fighting for territory was concerned was second to none. And when you're missing someone like a Mitchell Pearce, that needs to be at a premium. Having the luxury of the left-right combo of Keary and Pearce, it was good to see that Cornish stepped up, played that left-footer role, and did so very effectively. When you're without Origin players, you need your current stars to stand up and go full fucking tack at the line. And Jared Warrior-Hargraves certainly did that for the Roosters. A big effort for that big man. I mentioned that in the preview that was what was going to be required of him, just with Tedavano and the like not being as experienced, starting to develop into genuine starters, that's for sure, but just didn't have that experience under the belt. And yeah, Warrior-Hargraves ended up with 15 hit-ups, 216 metres and 31 tackles. So, you combine those running metres, trying to, get the just deserves that someone like your 9 in Jake Friends trying to get you off the back of all his defensive work. He ended up with 61 tackles this week. So again, clearing 60 tackles a week. I still am a bit befuddled as to why Connor Watson isn't being used more effectively just to help out with that poor bastard's workload. You can't just send a guy out there to pass a footy off the ground and tackle blokes. Eventually, it's going to come unstuck for someone at some point. Looking over to the Rabbitohs side, I thought Reynolds was really sound again. His kicking game was thereabouts, but it was probably just more the exploitation and execution. Last week we seen them really pepper that left-hand side in trying to get to Alex Johnson, and whether or not they felt like there was a bit of a mismatch on that edge, and Johnson may not have been able to get the opportunities like he could have over Josh Mansour. I'm not too sure, but I thought they would have at least explored that option, seeing those it was successful, and that they were sort of struggling to score points, and we see there on that scoreline that was evident. So yeah, a real disappointing loss for the Rabbitohs now, as we've seen on the ladder before. That really leaves them struggling. They come up against the Cowboys this week, who, all things considered, will have their Origin players come back, and then the Roosters get the bye this weekend. So they do what every team wants to do when they know they've got a bye coming in the following round, and that's get the 2 points. So it's effectively a 4-point win for the Roosters. So plenty of momentum coming off the back, getting those key victories over the likes of the Storm, and they would have been very impressed to come back and bounce back with that win after getting belted by the Sharks last week. So big tick in the box for you Roosters fans, and yeah, unfortunately Rabbitohs fans, you're sort of just left clutching at straws. I'm not sure what sort of answers they're going to come up with. Thought they were pretty good against the Cowboys earlier in the year. Did end up losing, but weren't terrible. So they're going to have to try and find something. And even though it's a home game for the Rabbitohs, I do believe it's being played in Cairns. So no easy task giving away a home game to North Queensland. Into the second game, it was poised as being my pick of the weekend as far as game quality goes, and didn't really live up to the standard too much, to be honest. I thought all the games were definitely subpar, and it was evident that Origin talent was missing. Penrith did get the upset, as I sort of thought they may. Inevitably, it just shows how hard it is to consistently win week after week in the NRL, and the Manly side had a good run. I believe they were 5 on the trot. So yeah, they ended up going down 16 points to 8 down in Penrith at Pepper Stadium. It's not to say that Manly didn't get their opportunities. I know the fans will be sitting here screaming at me now, saying 14-4 penalty count. How the fuck does that elicit getting opportunities or sound opportunities? But still had 12-6 offload, so you've generated double the amount of opportunities of second phase play than your opposition. Panthers had 11 more missed tackles, and Penrith only had 5 more sets. So you sort of look at 10 penalties, but they only had 5 more sets. So did they take full advantage of those penalties? Evidently not, because that gap was a lot shorter than what that penalty count sort of suggested. So a big tick in the box for Penrith in the sense that they were able to grind out a closer victory. They were unable to shut out a Cowboys side up in North Queensland a couple of weeks ago, and we see sort of Anthony Griffin laying down the law there at half time. And I thought they responded quite well. They only had that 8-point lead, and we see the man on the edge there in number 16 for Manly, Sean Lane. He was absolutely terrorising that edge. I thought he was one of their better players, but still just rushed for time. Every now and then was Daly Cherry Evans, and I thought that's what Penrith did really well. They tried to get under his skin a lot and really take away his time. But when they just needed to get back to basics, and we see them getting stuck on an edge there, coming about only 30-odd metres outside of their territory, they started playing too lateral too early. And I think that sort of comes back down to Matt Moylan's involvements. I think at times he wants to get too involved, and he probably touches the footy too much. I do honestly believe that that is the thing, that you can touch the footy too much. But I would just like to see him have a look around, have a look at the forwards that they've got at their disposal, and get that go forward going, so that they can then present those opportunities later for their danger men on the edges. Especially when you've got like Harawira and Naira and the like pushing around, and we see Zalesniak. He's a great finisher. He was the one who went the length and creates those opportunities, much like a Jordan Rapana does for the Canberra Raiders. So if they can sort of set that structure up a little bit more, and Moylan realised that he does have such a freak of a kid coming through in his partnership in Nathan Cleary, that things are going to be okay. And I think that at times they look a little bit rushed, a little bit stressed. But with the punch that they had off the bench in Leilani Latu, ended up with 162 metres off 19 hit-ups with 21 tackles. Merrin was huge as well. 18 hit-ups, 185 metres, 29 tackles. So that's what you expect of a guy like Merrin, who's played at the level representing Australia, New South Wales. That's what got him those representative jerseys in the first place. So if he can get those sort of numbers ticking over on a weekly basis, like we've seen Gallen and Tapau do for their respective clubs, that's the sort of standard that needs to be set. And that will go a long way to winning more of these tight games. So whilst there's still a lot to clean up for Penrith, I think Anthony Griffin will be very much pleased with the fact that they were able to grind out a win against a club that is sort of renowned for trying to do that and actually executing on that quite well this season. Looking over to the Manly side again, I sort of mentioned that right arm carry of Sean Lane getting on the outside, creating space for not only Travojević's try, but he also got DCE through a couple of times as well. I thought that was good, but it was more just those fifth tackle options. DCE wasn't as clinical as he has been. Just kicking a few balls dead, giving away the 7 tackle sets, and when you're playing that territory game in such a tight tussle, you really need to be getting those things right. And that's the business that these guys are a part of. That the execution has to be set on a premium on a regular basis, and unfortunately it wasn't quite there. And I can empathise to a degree on that penalty count, but you've got to control the controllables, and when you're going to give teams opportunity to hold the footy for longer, and they do so, it's any wonder that they're able to get victories. So you address those sort of issues, and I guess at times you've just got to accept that sometimes you're not going to get the rub of the green. Into the third game, so it was a second game on the Super Saturday, which was the understrength Melbourne Storm side up against Parramatta. Parra ended up running away with this one, 22 points to 6. We see on screen there, Nate Miles made his debut for the Melbourne Storm side. Thought Robbie Rocco might have got a start. He didn't. Ended up playing for their feeder side East in the Queensland Cup on the weekend. and there was another few changes. Curtis Scott didn't end up playing. I didn't see him in the lower grades either, so I'm not sure if there was an injury that I'm unaware of or haven't read about, or whether he was just getting rested. I know they're pretty stringent on that sort of stuff. I know Riley Jacks has been rested at times, even when he was available for lower grade. So Tonamapea got his opportunities, and I think that was pretty obvious as to my thoughts being reaffirmed. We see him miss a very, very poor one-on-one tackle. Yes, I know he's a big body in Sammy Radradra, but look at that. Like, he just gets on his outside constantly. And I know there's a winger there, and they were missing Vunivalu at that point, and they were just exploiting that edge. But it was very fast flowing this first 20 minutes, and it was good to see this battle between Addo Carr and Bevan French. They were at it all night in a really positive way. There was no malice at all, but they were getting stuck right in. And the execution was there early on. The Parramatta side really made Melbourne pay for that sin binning. But again, you add on top of the fact that they're now missing Munster as well as the other 5 that were missing for Game 2 of Origin. And it was evident the influence that he was still able to bring to that inexperienced side. And I think that was sort of just what tipped the boat over the edge. Was missing Munster, and that they then had to scramble with Chase Blair going off. So it looks like his season's done from what I've been hearing. So we'll either see Tonamapea keep his spot for the rest of the season, or Curtis Scott may get his digs. And I'll certainly be leaning more towards Curtis Scott. I know defensively at times he's come up with similar sort of mistakes that Tonamapea has, but I think he just offers a bit more in attack, and he's got a bit more grub about him. He's got a bit more of a spine, and I think Tonamapea can sort of get his head down. But yeah, it was a, considering the level of expertise that was missing in this game, I thought the Melbourne Storm really stood up. We see there, it's 16-6 with still 15 to go, and they don't score until later on in this match. I thought they really dug their heels in quite well, and this man here, Gutherson, he sort of ices it here in the 69th minute. But yeah, I didn't think the score was truly reflective of the game. I thought they dug in a lot better, and it was just their finishes. We've seen in the past when there's no Cronk, no Smith, no Slater, the ball doesn't get to the players who normally score the points. And for them this year, it's been Kafusi on that right edge, and then your 2 wingers in Addo Carr and Vunivalu with their finishing capabilities. So if you look back, I don't know for sure, but just off the top of my head and my recollection of the game, Vunivalu and Addo Carr don't tend to score points when there's no Cronk and Smith. So when those key members of that Melbourne Storm spine aren't present, those points, they don't seem to be able to just get to the edges and strip that number as well as they normally do when those guys are around. So yeah, I wasn't super shocked not to see either any of those guys get over the stripe, because they get over the stripe due to the fact that those other players are creating that space and opportunity for them. So, you got to give your just deserves to Parramatta. They've still got to go down there and get the victory, and that was their challenge to be the favourites and to get the win. So we've seen that happen to South this week, and they didn't come up with it. We've seen it happen to Newcastle last week. They didn't come up with it. So, that sometimes there's a bit of pressure that comes with, a side that's not expected to win most of the time, and now they're given an opportunity with a weakened outfit, and they've still got to go out there and perform at their best. And I thought Clint Gutherson really stood up and grabbed the bull by the horns, much like Mitchell Moses did for them last week. And that cements them again. They've got that 2-point gap, which is vital. So yeah, moving forward, they've only got two of their last 7, because they got a bye. 2 of the last 7 games of teams in the top 8. So everything else is teams below them, or at least equal with them. And that one team, they actually have Brisbane twice. So Brisbane twice in the run home. Otherwise, it's everyone outside of the 8. So they're a fair chance of winning enough games to see them stay inside that 8. So Parra fans, there's a glimmer of hope that if they just stay consistent now, and perhaps if they can even jag an upset win over a side in Brisbane that's without Darius Boyd and Milford, because I think they play them relatively soon, within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So you may get to have a crack at Brisbane without Milford and Boyd, which would be a big plus in the box of Parramatta. So yeah, a vital win, and moving forward, I think the momentum's really working for them, and they'll enjoy this week off. The final game, well, it was it was, how can I best describe it? It was a battle of the directionless here, the Dogs and the Knights, and I had to feel for Brock Lamb in the events that we will see happen, and I think the emotion here we see on screen, Josh Reynolds, it was his last game at Belmore, and his mum was there, and he was sort of tearing up a little bit as he was running onto that field, and I think the emotion did get to him a little bit. His involvement wasn't highly influential. He came up with 6 missed tackles and actually gave away that penalty that gave Brock Lamb the opportunity to take the game to extra time. So I think if he looks at his performance objectively, he'll be a little bit disappointed and feel like he got overawed. He was good in patches. I mean, like we see there that he nearly creates opportunities for Tolman. But yeah, there was 2 try saves that really got Newcastle in the front foot. It was all Canterbury this first 20. And when you're coming up against the last place team and you only find 6 points with that amount of possession in the first 20 minutes, I thought it was danger signs. I guess by the letter of the law, yeah, he was outside the 10, quick tap, it's all good, and I like to see that. I'm in favour for this being blown week in, week out. I'd be in favour of, if you're standing on the 10, it's good enough. I'd like to see that rule be removed. If you get a penalty and the defence isn't good enough and reactive enough to get on their horse and make the tackle, I think it then brings into play a scenario where a 5-minute sin bin rule would be quite effective. I think when you're being quite desperate in defence and you deliberately give away a penalty, to lose a player for 10 minutes, I think it's a bit too crucial. I think if you look at 5 minutes, you're potentially going to be out for maybe 3 sets of defence. I think that's a big enough penalty. I don't think you should miss anywhere up to 5 or 6. And I think it would change the game. It would give teams more opportunities to score points when they're on offer. And it would also test the resolve of a defensive outfit on whether they're going to be desperate and give away that sin bin, or back themselves to try and nail the defence with short numbers. So Newcastle just got to the point here where they thought it was done and dusted. And it was great urgency. Moses Mbye, I thought, had a fantastic game at dummy half, and it's looking like it could spell the end for Michael Leisha at 9 for the Bulldogs. They may keep him there because they did look a lot more destructive than they have in the past. But yeah, we see here Reynolds, sort of loses the plot a little bit. And I sort of tossed up when watching this kick of just letting this play out for the next 20 minutes with no sound. Like Brock Lamb, he just had a stinker of a day. Dreadful passes, drop balls when there really shouldn't have been any drop ball. The kick obviously for Mbye to run away and score, and then he gets his chance at redemption, and you hate to spray a bloke, and this isn't a shot at the bloke personally, but it's his performance and it's his job. It was a terrible attempt at goal, and you expect a higher standard at NRL, even though it wasn't a throw over. It was definitely kickable, put it that way, and the moment just got the better of him, and I think it just sort of sums up where Newcastle are. They don't have that experience to get the wins in those clutch moments, and I honestly don't know what else to say other than the fact that it comes back to that inexperience. That they're not putting together the full 80. Yes, the Dogs got lucky, but sometimes that's what you need. Who knows? We may see a different Dogs now. I highly doubt it. I can't see them mounting much more off the back of that. The fact that they only scored 6 points with such high possession in that first 20 minutes. But yeah, I don't know what sort of answers you come up with. You must have thought when it's 18-8 and the game's just about finished, even when they do score that late try, not the one that ended up winning the game for them, but the one prior, still thought, just hold your defensive structures and we'll still get the win. and there's probably going to be a bit of joy to come off the back of that disappointing loss to the Tigers now. And I think that's sort of where the thinking of the players then went. And, it's just those brief lapses in concentration. We only look at the game between Melbourne and Broncos the other week. What were the 3 tries in like 6 minutes or something like that? It's those brief lapses in concentration, and it doesn't matter where the teams are placed on the ladder. We're showing how close this competition is, that teams can still execute. And to let in 2 tries, 3 minutes, done. But then it goes back in the other direction. The Dogs, the way they celebrated the last try, felt like it was done. Short kickoff, ill discipline, sums up their sort of season as well. So, a perfect reflection for both sides. And the fact that, it was only a 2-point ball game. I think it's still danger signs for the Canterbury side, even though they were missing some Origin stars. But, the Knights were missing a super influential player in Dane Gagai as well. So, I don't know what to read out of it much more than let's move on and never speak of that game again, because it was pretty embarrassing as far as the standard. I know it ended up being pretty entertaining just for the pure fact that it was close, but outside of that fact, pretty boring game, pretty boring round, to be honest. Very much looking forward to all Origin stars getting through the game unscathed and moving forward into the back end and getting towards finals. So that is everything for the weekend. So a nice short sharp rounds, nice short sharp rant from me, and we'll be back on. I'll probably jump online tomorrow. We'll do a bit of a Origin preview either tomorrow or on the day on Wednesday, and have a look at these 2 lineups and what I think's gonna play out, or at least the possibilities that could play out. So plenty to come from me. So we'll do a preview and a review of Origin as well, and then a preview for round 19. Alright, gang. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you in the next couple of days.